I remember you saying, Sven, that Victoria was where you thought everything started. Victoria.
Well, everything went fucked.
But oh, sorry, it's Mickey. Say hello, Mickey, to Sven.
Hello.
Sven.
Hello, mate. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sven.
Go on, say the bit you were saying.
What about the
Windows.
The Dutch looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a concrete, you know, like Henry VIII. Concrete mullins and sills, all in one, you know.
That's what I was going to add. It looks Tudor.
Has it been messed with through time, you know?
Yeah, but it's been dug in the ground and it's Tudor-like. But anyway, I just wanted to add that bit. Thank you very much, Sven.
More investigation.
Yeah, thank you, Sven.
Thanks, Sven.
Hey, Karen. Hey, Mickey. Yeah, I think there's an alchemy of styles going on there, right? And you know, this is why I'm looking forward to this tour coming up in July, because you can connect so many other different styles of argumentation to this topic. Like, for example, you know, 1 minute there's a bit of Tudor, there's a bit of this, there's a bit of that. It's all this, like, you don't know what to think sort of thing. And they do that with so many topics, don't they? Where it's basically just to confuse everyone. Really, you know, it hasn't happened by accident. That's the thing. The cladding of these buildings and the you know, the concealing of them and all that is planned. You know, that is an you know, it's like a military scale sort of operation. It's been going on now for Christ knows how long, before the San Francisco earthquakes and all that, you know, so-called. But anyway, yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for that voice message. Always good to hear other bits and bobs.
Yes, why did they do all the cladding? That would have, you know, me and Mickey noticed it. Well, the first day we met each other, we went to Hyde Park Corner and we were looking at the fountains. And we noticed that the building, we were saying, God, look at all that stone. And then we said, oh no, they're not. They're like little tiles they put on the top to cover it. And they're covering the red brick. And now we know red brick goes back to Henry VIII, goes back even further and further and further. Yeah, and so basically the buildings are a lot older than they're saying they are. So that's incredible in itself. Anyway, big hugs, Sven. And yeah, anything you wanted to say, Mickey?
Hi, Sven.
Say it. All right, thank you.
Hi again, Karen. Yeah, that is exactly the point that I'm kind of trying to make is, and Trinity 4 is as well, and a few others, is that you have to question the whole backstory of the whole royal family, because a lot of that is to justify those amazing stately homes, like Hampton Court and all that sort of stuff, right? You know, we have to remember we're led to believe that we were agricultural, and all you had was a local sheriff and his soldiers, and that was it. You know, there was no industry. So they couldn't have been possibly built in those times with the methods at our disposal that we're told, obviously, right? Yeah. So I would deeply question any history books predating 1800, or maybe the first industrial revolution, which is sort of the latter stages of the 1700s. Before that, what were the human race doing for thousands of years? Goofing off, it seems, eh? But anyway, yeah, I just find it fascinating. Education system, industrial revolution, all that all ties into those dates. Anyway, have fun. Speak soon.
Yeah, and then we have another place called Blenheim Palace. Oh my God, it's up near Oxford. You should look at that. It is much more magnificent than Buckingham Palace. And it was a palace. So, Blenheim Palace that was. And we've got another one called, what's it called? That's Blenheim Palace. And then we've got one in Newbury called something, it's very, the word is very similar to Blenheim, but it's not Blenheim. Valham Palace or something. And that's the same, that's a beautiful building down there, really old. Obviously it's a business centre. There are so many weird things, like me and Mickey noticed a few months ago when we started going around, because we've got some pillar boxes here. So I knew the ones in Hungerford. And then when we were driving through somewhere else, we found another one, which was not as old, but it was still old. It was just donked on the side of the road up the canal. And then, you know, you're just like, that was nothing like the other two. The other two had tiles on them and looked like they were for gun placements. I mean, big guns. Whereas the smaller one looked like it was for rifles. But it just goes on like that.
Concrete pillar box.
Yeah, and those things are everywhere. Useless they were. Absolutely useless they were, really. But, yeah, we're finding that as well, by the way. All this stuff. I actually feel, you said Victoria, but I think it's I think it's Henry VIII, the War of the Roses. That's where it goes back to. That's where, and they've muddled it all in and called it Norman and all that, when actually it comes back from that time forward. Henry VIII, I reckon. Yeah, somewhere there. The War of the Roses. And big hugs, my darling.
Yeah, an interesting conversation, isn't it? Because War of the Roses, I think War of the Roses is one of those examples that's there to deceive us. Because again, it gives credence to why England has the red rose as its emblem, and then you've got the Lancashire and the Yorkshire nonsense. You know, I mean, I know people who come from parts of Yorkshire who can't stand people from Lancashire. They've never been over there. You ask yourself, why? What's all that rivalry based on? They don't even know them. But yeah, I mean, fact of the matter is there's loads of these massive buildings. You know, my dad was in the army for many years, and I went to a lot of parades as a kid. And they used to stand outside Holyrood Palace and all these big palaces all around the country, up in Scotland, up in Wales, wherever. You know, and I never twigged as a kid. But you look at it now and you just think that, you know, those buildings are simply impossible with the means at our disposal in the times we were told that we had those means. So whether it started Henry VIII or later, fact is we've been lied to on a huge scale. Speak soon.
I totally agree with you, Sven, because how could, you know, when we get to the Lancashire and the Yorks, you don't find it very often in the history books that they're actually the same family. They're the Plantagenets. The Queen comes from the other side of the family, which is illegitimate. The Queen is illegitimate, but from that reason. But basically, they don't explain the Lancasters and the Yorks are actually the same family fighting. One has a red rose, one has a white rose, and then Roman Emperor Henry VIII comes in and turns that into a Tudor rose. So he's turned the past into something else. And then, as he's a new dynasty, why is he called Henry VIII? Eighth. It's obviously to do with the numbers or something. Because wouldn't you be called like Bert the First or Mickey the First or Sven the First? You're not going to call yourself Henry VIII, as 7 more of you before, if he's a new dynasty. So that bit I kind of understand, because that's all just bananas. So yeah, I've been looking this stuff up myself because I just find it all bananas that you cannot get the history to match at all. So we don't even know how old the buildings are that we're in. I mean, yeah, they're obviously a lot older than they're telling us. They're pretending they're 1800s, but they're older. But I still think that you know, it's like they walked into this place and it was here somehow as well. That's the other thing. But, you know, Henry VIII is on horses. How did he get all the brick buildings? It's all crazy. It's all rubbish. It's all a load of rubbish.
And that, for me, is exactly the key bit there. He was on horses. And that's what me and Trinity spoke about when we were on the Where It's At podcast a couple of months ago, right, after we did the live streaming. And I was saying to him that logistics is the key in all of this. If you don't have the transportation systems in place, the infrastructure, then you ain't going anywhere with any rocks, bricks, stones, or whatever. You're not doing anything. And this part of the world was supposed to be shrubbery and woodlands and all that. You weren't crossing over the Pennines with an army on horseback, fighting battles. How were you eating? What were you doing? Where were you sleeping? The provisions. I mean, the military now, they don't move anywhere without provisions, hospitals, medics, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't happen. They don't do it. The Royal Navy doesn't go anywhere without a Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which is ships with provisions for the frigates and all that. They don't go anywhere. So it's just all bollocks. It's bullshit. It's a backstory, and we've been fed a nice big fat lie, and we've been feeding off it since.
And there's something else they don't talk about, the pneumatic trains. They came first. I mean, the tubes could still be pneumatic, but they're bigger. But the pneumatic trains in the smaller tunnels came first, and me and Mickey want to go to the train museum because they're using a pneumatic train, and they used to use that to deliver the post underground all through London.
Office, isn't it?
Yeah, so those ones are smaller. So they came first. To me, that is the league. I mean, I know there's no such thing as the League of Gentlemen, but when I said to you, there seemed to be these rich ones. They had everything. They had beautiful architecture, the pneumatic trains and everything. Then something happened, and then came the other lots, and the tubes came in that bit or something. I just don't know what they've done. I don't know what it is. It's all bananas, isn't it, Mickey?
Yeah, yeah.
But the pneumatic trains, the smaller ones, they came first. When were they? 1700s? So yeah, where was there must have been masses of infrastructure, and there. They're lying and I ain't buying. I don't even know what to say really, because you keep finding bits more information and it's always different. But you never find enough to say, ah, right, we can put that in a time zone. But there's this stuff there that just doesn't match in with the rest.
I actually want to do a video, or I want to do a series of videos, and I might need some support with it as well. Actually, maybe we could have a chat about it. But what I want to do is I want to really break down the timeline, and then I want to do different timeline. No, well, I want to do the same timeline, but with different events plotted on those timelines. So political, architectural, wars, economical, all these sorts of stuff. And then do like overlays and really get into the timelines, and then you know, and look at the official narrative, because of course none of it makes sense. It's all nonsense. Even the dates we use today, 2022. Well, to what? To Christ's birth. Well, that's if you believe in that story. But then we've got to believe that the backstory is all accurate. And if the backstory is wrong, start with our kings and queens. Well, all that is nonsense as well. So we're already captured in a lie just by sheer fact that we're using a date that isn't correct, because that's based on a myth as well. So wherever you look, you're bouncing into lies and deceit, aren't we?
You are exactly right about that. To make some of my videos about going through the kings, talking about the Lancasters and the Yorks over the years, I kept going to this site which was showing the dates of when Ethelred and all those came, and then you've got Harold, and then it starts going into the kings you more or less know, and they started in about the 800s. And then when I went somewhere else one day, I thought, well, let's just look up the kings and queens here. They were all completely different dates. You can't find someone giving you the same dates anywhere. It is extremely difficult. And then when we were looking at Hampton Court, realising now what you know about bricks, and the whole thing is brick, you realise there's different ages of bricks in that thing as well. They're not all the same age. There's older ones. You're like, you know, we've obviously had many hangouts with our melted reality, and you know, he's saying, hang on, what he says is that some big event happened, some obviously electrical, and things got burnt. And I said, you know, like there might be a really old building and a younger building together, and once they're burnt through this thing, you won't be able to know the difference of the ages, but they still look old today. And then he's saying that when it gets hit, it changes the bricks into different colours. Some bricks go yellow and grey and all that. But when it's been hit that badly, whole sections will be stone. And even when he looks at the stone, he can still see the lines of bricks in them. And you're like, they got turned to stone, brick. And so that's when you see walls with brick and stone in them. It was all brick and it's been turned to stone. And even that just blows my mind. And then he was talking about the clay. You know, with clay, what do you think that is? That's melted brick. So there must have been a lot more buildings. They must have been absolutely magnificent. And then, like, when we did our melted reality, the Fort Pick he did, the legs, remember I told you the legs were facing different ways. Up until that point, nearly every star fort we came across was very regimented. You know, whatever shape it was, that was the shape, and it was equal. So I'm not saying the Fort Pick is unequal, but the legs are the different ways. Suddenly, all Mickey and I could find were those, and that's what that complex near Dover's all about. The legs are all in different directions, and now look, Aztec. You know, when you look at them, they look like animals, and they're Aztec. But they might be for the eagle, see? And what you're looking with the very end of the legs is the eagle legs. They're just flattened out eagles. And then when you think about that and the War of the Roses and the Tudor rose, I was thinking that that's what the roses were. They were still the eagles, just slightly different form when you see the shape of them.
Well, just to get back to your point on the monument outside Buckingham Palace, well, that's now a Victorian memorial. And this is the thing, right? All these big memorials are all linked with Victoria. They're not linked with any other monarchs. Right, so you'll have like lakes and stuff named after Victoria, bloody waterfalls, national parks, whatever, right? The Albert Hall, well, that's her hubby, right, and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, it seems that there's a lot of reference to her, the victorious one, Nike in Greek, right? That kind of makes sense. And there's only one Victoria. There's not Victoria the first, second, third, or all that. But yeah, and with the other stuff. You know, what about the raising of the ground level? How is that explained? No mention of that in the history books. Clearly there's been a cataclysmic event, whether from below up or from above down, whatever, but something's happened, hasn't it? You know, and you know that can't simply be explained away. So even if we talk about how old are the bricks, the stones, what were they once, and all that sort of stuff, like for example the building that I filmed yesterday, that's made of so-called Purbeck rock, right? But of course the Purbeck rock, when you look at how deep the windows are in the wall, they're only about 6 inches in the wall maximum, which means for me that that rock that you're seeing on the outside is just pure cladding. It's not actually rock deep in that sense, you know. It's not that it hasn't got the thickness of it that it appears from the front when you're looking at it, because the building itself, of course, is all made of bricks. But even when we're not sure about the materials and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't then stop that one big massive conundrum, which is, well, what then explains all the basement windows underground and the necessary use of prism lighting and all that sort of stuff to conceal it and offer light to these rooms that are underground, that weren't built to be underground, you know. Questions upon questions, all connected.
Yeah, but then maybe she was a new era again, like a reset. She was part of that reset, and now we're in another reset. 1806 was supposed to be the end of the Roman Empire. That's when they got Napoleon. But now we learn very differently about him, and they were giving him red roses here, so they obviously loved him, and he was a Roman emperor, and obviously trying to break away somehow from, or doing something different, and they didn't. We don't even know. But he's gone from a baddie to a goodie now, in my estimations, and that's all really weird. And it was supposed to end in 1806, and she came about. Well, Buckingham Palace was done in the 1830s, and then she's here. So it could have been another reset, that one. And then comes Victoria, the man. Everybody says she's a man, so, yeah. That's one part, 1 second. But you're right.
I'll try that again. There have been official attempts at, explaining this away by the raising of roads and all that sort of stuff. They talk about that with this Haussmann guy, don't they, in Paris? And that allegedly there were people forced to go along with plans where road levels were raised, and then subsequently their ground level flats would then be underground, and would they be happy with that? And allegedly there's paperwork on all of that. But that's nonsense, because how do you then explain areas where there are no roads attached to them that have come up and covered half a church or whatever, out in the country? Because you have evidence of all of that. If you go to smaller dwellings, or places with less dwellings, I should say, where there's hardly any transport networks, well, then there's no excuse there to raise any roads, is there? But yet the ground level has still come up. So that gets rid of that explanation from the mainstream as well. Feeble attempts again at deceit, really.
When you see any buildings or any statues or anything, they go back to Victorian time, don't they, Mickey?
Mm-hmm.
You don't find them much older, unless what they do was they took down the old ones to put hers in their place. Yeah, that's interesting. And there's another bit now. 1 second, because I've got a bit more. I don't know if it's an answer, but anyway, let's listen to the second one again. Hang on. I think that's another really weird bit where we're looking at buildings and they're showing you all these old buildings it doesn't matter if it's London, New York, or Europe or whatever, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, how did they get that stone up there? Look at the size of the stone bricks. You see all that, but actually, me and Mickey realised, when we met earlier on this year, when we met in Hyde Park in Paddington, and went to Hyde Park, and we were looking at this building, we realised that it had the same thing, and they were like tiles put on the front. So underneath would be brick,
false cladding, innit?
and it was false cladding on the front. And that explained some of it, didn't it? It did.
Right, yeah.
It explained something, but then you're like, it's almost still as bad than you thinking of that there's stone bricks up there, great big stone, because they still got to put all the cladding on the front. So if the buildings were originally different, or brick, or whatever it is, now they've put claddings in front. So that's just amazing in itself. But the other thing they started to do was to render buildings with this concrete front instead. Maybe it was easier to do that, cheaper, than putting the claddings on. But originally, you're thinking, look at that stone building, but they weren't. And the cladding is like tiles, which they put on the front. But then it brings you into, oh my God, it's a production line. These things are being ordered. They're being made. Like when you're looking at the domes, those things are made. they're all structured and then put in its place. It's not like they make the dome on site.
Some bricks have numbers on them, don't they?
Yeah, Melted Reality said that the the forts had the bricks were numbered. They may stop at 1,000 and start at 1, but he's found bricks with numbers on them, and he's found, like, say 101, 102, 103. He's found a section of bricks with numbers on them.
But they must be putting them there for some purpose.
I was watching a video once when I think it was the San Francisco fire, you know, the earthquake, which it wasn't an earthquake. They destroyed that, obviously, because of the TARTARIA or whatever it is, buildings there. And then you could see inside the structure of the dome thing, and you realised that it was actually a metal structure inside. It wasn't brick, that was metal. So they were making all these things, and, like, you know, it's a metal structure that's been destroyed. You know, it's only when you slow the footage down or you look at things more deeply that you see these things. I think you understand what I'm saying there. Metal, not brick. So it's like they've added 1,000 years, but we're missing a bit of time still but we've got cars and cameras back to the 1700s now. You know, Elizabeth was the 1500s. We're getting back there now, and it probably went back there. You know, tunnels to Europe. There's tunnels already built. Like, how did they manage to do that when we don't do it today? The only thing I can come up with the roads being a divil level in London is that map that Mickey found, and I did a video on it. It was a bit bizarre because when you looked at the map, then London was destroyed, basically. But then, basically, they were probably just taking out specific things that they wanted. Obviously, targets, things. You know, they obviously did things or whatever. And maybe once they had destroyed enough of that, it put everything on different levels. Or maybe originally, before they did that, London was a bit higgledy-piggledy with little hills and roads. And then they build the roads all at one level, which means part of London is not underground and a part of it is. But, you know, we already know that Amsterdam is built up. Venice is built up. Why couldn't it be the same for London? And, you know, everything seems to be down. You've got to go down. I've got a bit more for you, Sven, because what it is Mickey worked in London. And so, yeah, well, tell him what you saw.
What?
Mickey went down some of these tunnels when he was younger.
What, the
Train. Yeah, go on, just talk.
train? Oh, the pneumatic train system?
Yeah, no, where you had the houses you saw down below.
Oh, that was a few months back, yeah. That
Go
was
on,
just
explain that to Sven.
on the way to Paddington, and sort of like I could just see just inside about 100 meters there was just like some men like in the tunnel, but the tunnel sort of went off on about 30 meters from the tube that I was on, and I could just see. I thought, my God, there's a fucking street there, like acting as like you think it was the wall, but it's not. It had blocked up windows, blocked up doors, all brick. I could see the lintel on the floor, like to the entrance of the door, and I could see a fucking road path, like a path, literally next to it. I'm thinking,
Hang on.
like a path literally next to the door, and I thought, Jesus, that's a street. And then if I was to think when I come out of the tunnel, when I look up, I see what houses they were. And I'm thinking, Jesus, these are mud flooders of where this is the bottom at the back of where they are. I'm thinking, what the fuck's going on here? Now that ain't right. And yet, when you go up top,
We
it's
did
like,
see something
you've got
about
white
that,
cladding
Mickey.
on the
Do you
top of it.
remember? This is why we want to go and see down in
They're hiding a lot under
the
there, I
train
swear to God, as
museum.
well.
Do you remember when the woman said, she said, in London, you're going to come across these grids in the middle of the road and you can see another level underneath. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And then that they said was, they made those things for workers when they were working there, and then they would know which street they were and all that. And you're like,
Even
what?
named them as well.
1 second.
I lived in Hamburg for many years in Germany, and Hamburg, for example, is built on a massive swamp area, right? An area that makes absolutely no sense to build anything. Absolutely no sense to build anything. Certainly not going down into the ground, because it's too damp and moist, right? It's too much work. But yet, you know, they have a very, very considerable underground system, just like London, with the tube system, and all that sort of stuff. And Hamburg has some amazing
what we would call old world structures. Just the town hall itself, which is called the Rathaus, nothing to do with rats, although that's how it's written. Yeah, that building itself is just phenomenal, and you have them all over Germany. And then you got the story of all the concrete bunkers that the Germans allegedly built just before World War II. Well, where did they have manpower for all that? Or did they know what was coming? I haven't listened to your other two messages yet, so I'll listen to them first, then I'll respond back to you. Otherwise, I'm going to be missing the thread. One sec.
So, in a sense, those could be the same things as what you were seeing with the houses. And so there is another level down there, but why would they do that? Why would we be...
It seemed to be a street, yeah, a level, its own level. Seemed to be like that tunnel wasn't there. It should, because...
But we've seen it. It's in one of my videos. I put it out with the woman explaining that in London there are grids on the road, and when you look down you can see another level under there, but that was made for the workers. Rah, 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 and it had street names on them so they knew where they were when they came out, and you're like, wow, that's amazing that they did all that for the workers.
Yeah, just for them, yeah.
Yeah, but Mickey said that you can see houses down there. Anyway, you're gonna messaging away, so we're
at the back of them, really, you know.
We'll listen to your messages.
It's like I was at the. It's like the tube was in the back garden, you know, and then the mud's just come over and covered half of it, and they've dug the tube out, you know. It just didn't look right, you know. The house is outside.
Can you go back and take pictures? Here you go then. Yeah. Go on.
What's that?
Explain what the extra bit that you...
Well, when we came out of the tunnel, it was like we was outside. And then as the tunnel, the tube went away, literally in front of me was like a retaining brick wall, massive. And right behind that was these Georgian houses with porthole windows and proper like brick style, you know, arches and everything. And as I looked down to my right, followed the retaining wall, and it literally went into the tunnel. And I thought, Jesus, that's the rest of these houses at the bottom under this tunnel of what I'm seeing. So I'm on a street level. So I'm thinking, how the frig is all like muddied over? And like, how the hell did it?
Was it muddied or
It's
was
crazy.
it structure?
It was like he did that retaining wall to keep the mud back, you know, and they're hidden and like right down.
But Mickey, they'd have to have built...
It's like,
They would have to build the retaining wall
but this is the thing.
first.
This is, yeah, but the wall was like...
That's
part of the-
what Sven was talking about in
it's a
his
part of
videos the
like,
other
You
day.
can see it was a part of the whole fucking like outside station. It must have been like a fucking choo-choo tube station, you know, not like the steam one, because it's outside. It's on its where the tube station is.
And
level
brick
here,
again.
You go in the fucking roads up here and the houses.
When we go to the train station, I have
It's
to.
crazy.
I have to see
It's
this.
fucking mad. I'm telling you, you see.
When
like,
we go to the museum, Mickey, I got to see this then. Yeah.
It's like a fucking. I swear, it's like a level, you know, from the tube station. You think, well, this is like. This must have been for the steam trains for being outside. You know, before anything happened. It's just so weird.
Or pneumatic,
Yeah.
which is
Pneumatic.
also. Which is crazy that we had steam and pneumatic at the same time, and one's completely different to the other. So, which one was first, the steam or the pneumatic? Was the pneumatic real? Well, I think it was. I think that's why they destroyed
The old gentleman
Crystal
the other day
Palace.
said- yeah. It's like even the gentleman the other day down the tube station, I told, and he said, yeah, he says, he even said to the post office.
Oh yeah, was it with the houses? Was it you that was telling me about the houses and they blanked it all off? Or was it Sven? No, it was Sven.
Sven, yeah.
He was telling me about how they used to be able to get into the tunnels at the bottom of their houses,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they cut them off.
From what I saw.
So when you think about that, and you think, how do they manage to do all that? Like, everything is just so, and it's built nicely. It's not, nothing we're looking at is built ropey like.
No, it's some of the stations like.
Yeah.
And these are outside again, but you've got arches going over the roofs, and
We've got to finish now.
you think like, my God, it's very.
Stop, Mickey, because we're sending message
you
upon
think it'd be,
message.
like-
It's an elaborate tube
It looks
station.
very elaborate when it's all brick. You know?
So how do they do all that? You can't just slap these things up.
No, it's well done, well made. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I do remember a time where I saw it in some history where Amsterdam, Holland was the place. They were the rich ones. They were the ones with the big buildings. They were the ones with the money. They were the ones that ran everything. Yeah. And then we know that they got badly flooded and Doggerland went and everything. So that's a bit strange. But they were the ones running everything. Probably before the East India Company.
Yeah, they knew how to float on water.
Yeah, they were the rich ones. I mean, we never think about the Dutch being rich. Etiquette and all this kind of stuff. It was from them.
And there's some of the style in it as well. I mean,
yeah. But anyway, look, we've done another minute. We've got to stop. But anyway, your turn, Sven, if you want to answer. Cool. Big hugs.
Well, again, that is a history book thing, isn't it, with the Dutch? They allegedly were very wealthy because of the tulip trade until everybody figured out how to grow their own tulips, and then that all collapsed and imploded and they just ended up a normal country. That's according to the narrative. But here we go again, though. This is where the buildings give it away, because you have the same buildings in Amsterdam as you find in Hamburg, as you find in Adelaide, as you find in Detroit. And that's the thing. So it's all inherited. Yes, there may have been the peoples around at that time that shuffled the power around in Europe, but at the end of the day, they were kind of introduced to the world that had already existed before in terms of architecture and that sort of stuff, right? But yeah, I would probably agree with you in terms of the Victoria thing as well, that she may be the dawn of a reset, and she was the figurehead of that reset, yeah, perhaps. But, whatever lived before, they were capable of building all that shit. And just to point to the retaining walls, which, as you said, Karen, I mentioned in the video, and we saw a lot of it here in Bournemouth, some of it, they've pulled that earth back clearly. They pulled the earth back from an already existing building. And then what they've done is they've tidied it all up, blah, 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 make the steps that lead down into that little ditch that's newly built, make it look all nice, to make it look like they purposely built the buildings like that. But of course, as you can see with the new buildings on the other side of the road, they build them on top of the slope. They don't build them down low and then have the ground come up around the building. That's not the way buildings are built. So retaining walls clearly were done after the fact. So building first, cataclysmic event of some sort second, retaining walls third, in that order.
I thought about what you said, right? And I said that about houses along canals. They built the houses first, then they built the canals, and everybody puts it the other way round, the canals and the houses. But my feeling is that maybe because of these retaining walls, and whenever you were walking around, I asked you a couple of times whether you thought they were star forts. Maybe that's what they're covering up on these buildings with these retaining walls. They're all star forts, and they managed to cover those up, because they didn't cover the ones up down by Dover and that, but maybe they're all part of that thing. So London's just a big star fort. And that's why there's all the tunnels and everything in it, because that's what they seem to have in them, the star forts. It's like a redoubt fort or something. They go underground. The same sort of thing. But one thing, I mean, London's a beehive, how did they do it back then? I already talked about those churches they're putting back to Normandy. That would be the 11th century. How did they do it? How did they do it all? It's as old as that. Oh my God! I'd like to scream actually, because it's so interesting, but it's also, I find it a bit freaky that we're going against the norm of everybody, really, aren't we? And I don't think people even realise what's in their back garden. If only people knew the real truth.
Yeah, very good point. I don't think people know to look. That's the thing, right? So it's a bit like the flat earth analogy, right? I used to travel from France to England all the time on the ferry, because my dad being in the military, right? And we sometimes on a clear day could see the White Cliffs of Dover from France. And we only ever put it down to a clear day. We never thought we shouldn't be able to see it because of the curve of the earth or anything. Because you don't think to look. And it's the same with these buildings. They're all around us. People walk over prism lights all the time when they're walking down a shopping street, Oxford Street, whatever street, Pickett Street, whatever city. There's evidence of these buildings being half underground all over the place. You could be right with the Star Fort. You could be right. But I would say not everywhere, though, because you have a lot of retaining walls in all sorts of places. But anyway, yeah, whichever way round it is, they had to have been constructed either way. And that in itself is a fascination, how on earth was that done? Because clearly there are many, many levels to all our towns and cities, aren't there, everywhere? And of course, when we look at, like, for example, the footage that we discuss on the Hangout, right? For example, not all those buildings have a retaining wall, do they? So some of them are just submerged, half submerged in the ground, and some of them look neat and tidied, hence me saying that I think that they've been tidied up. Maybe some of them were built on the other side of a star fort and you have that retaining wall effect. But then again, that again then doesn't explain, well, how come they're made of bricks in a time when we didn't have the factories to do so, etc., etc. So whichever way we swing it, we're left with another question to answer, aren't we? Yeah. I can imagine if we'd have known all this back in school. Our teachers wouldn't have had it easy, that's for sure.
That again, Mickey.
What I just said?
Yeah.
You should have recorded it.
I was getting it ready.
When I say it once, I'll never remember it again. But I just had a theory of where, like, a good few years back, they said, where did all the train tracks come from that go right across America? Who put them there? And yet it goes into that sort of, that era, in the lost era. So I'm thinking that if these train tracks were in England, London, then surely that was the easiest transportation to move brick. Yeah, where you just go, because probably why London's so tight together. You know, where buildings one side and the other just wide enough for even a tram to go down. You know, so that's just my theory. Yeah, like the trains would have, or the pneumatic trains would have took all the bricks. Yeah, deliver it. Yeah.
Only in London, though, unless they were
Yeah.
all over England.
Well, there could be another white city. I mean, you were saying, you know, and with that pneumatic train system that goes.
Who made the White City?
Wouldn't we like to know?
It just goes on and on. Just
Top
when you
hat,
get
I'd
there, you
say.
think, but there's always more.
Yeah, it's like they had their own infrastructure for themselves, didn't it? You know, it seems to be a lot of rich people, a lot of top hats. You know, you wear a top hat, they know who you are. You know, it's like the fat controller. You know, tells you what to do and where to put it. Yeah.
Anyway, it's your turn, Sven, if you want to.
Well, that also falls into line with the next lie, which is Brunel. Brunel, we learnt in school, built all his train tracks flat and level, which meant he had to build bridges, build tunnels, dig tunnels, and all that sort of stuff to enable his rail network to get around the great western part of Britain, right? Because trains couldn't go up and down hills, the old steam trains. And so, but also they had various gauges as well. I mean, I've been to the place in Swindon with my dad. We went there a few years ago and I came back to England. I was living with my mum and dad for about a year and a half before I got myself sorted down here in Bournemouth. And we had to go to Swindon to the Honda garage there. There used to be a big Honda garage factory there because my dad was driving Honda at the time. And yeah, we went in there and had a look. And I didn't even realise that, but I didn't twig back then. But yeah, they had different gauges. Well, you wouldn't set off with different gauges if you're starting that technology out, would you? You'd only have those gauges if the technology was already up and running. You had various choices at your disposal, but not when you're setting off with a new technology. You wouldn't then start off with different gauges, would you? You'd have one unified gauge. You'd make it easy on yourself because you wouldn't know how much material you'd need. It'd all be new technology to you, wouldn't it? Whereas our history books, if you look closely, actually they had to narrow it down to particular gauges from lots of different gauging in different countries. It was actually the train tracks that nailed it for me with the flat earth, funny enough. How ironic is that? You know, because who factored in the Earth's curve when they were building thousands of miles of Trans-Siberian rail networking? What a load of nonsense.
I hadn't really thought about the steam engines going up hills. I mean, we live on top of the Wessex down here, so they'd have to be able to make the trains to get up here. Yeah, but... yeah, how do they get the trains up here?
We've got a new video to make.
How do they get the trains up here? If steam trains can't go up hills? I mean, Sven's saying he had to build everything flat, so he had to make up for the thing, but... Right, but that would make sense, though, wouldn't it, where everything was built up then, Sven, because of the trains? Wow, what a life-changing thing. Wow. Floss, do you agree? The dog agrees. Do you agree, Floss? She's looking at me saying, what the hell are you on about? But anyway, big hugs. I think that's what it is. They had to build it all up for the trains then. Well, that makes sense in a way.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, you have trains that can go up and down hills now, but of course, in the early days when you were building a brand new train network, you weren't shoveling coal into the back of a burning furnace going up a steep hill or down a steep hill. That wasn't happening. Those trains had to be flat. So hence he had to build all those structures. So you go from Clifton Bridge to God knows what other things he did. Plus he built the SS Britannia, which is still in a dry dock in Bristol. I mean, the amount of stuff this guy did is absolutely phenomenal. Of course, another major figurehead placed into the history books for our consumption at school. You know, this is what they do. It's just phenomenal, really, to think about it. But yeah, so trains, you do get trains that go up hills now. Of course you do. But back then, in the day, when you were shoveling coal into the back of them, there was no way you were going up steep hills or down steep hills. That was not happening. Far too dangerous. Never mind the power. Yeah, and you wouldn't have been able to generate the power needed either. You know, and all that sort of stuff. You know, they would have all been in their absolute infancy. You wouldn't have had suspension. You would have all that sort of stuff. That technology would have all been kind of, if we're to believe the history books, they would have all had to invent that as they were going along. Oh, we need this. Oh, we've come across this obstacle because this is such a brand new technology now. Train tracks. We've never done it before, allegedly. So, you know, they were learning as they were going along. And we're supposed to believe that was all up and running within 10, 20, 30 years, so much so that it enabled us to build all these magnificent buildings all around the world, all at the same time. All of us with resources stretched at their limits because we're involved in so many wars, allegedly, as well, around the world. So we managed to do that as well. And we managed to communicate all our ideas to each other, pre-technology times. And just hopscotch from continent to continent in wooden boats. I mean, just fantastic. I don't know what we're questioning it all for. Really don't.
That's exactly right, Sven, because how did they build all the buildings and the complexes and everything if we were at war all the time? Like they say we are, we're always at war. There's the Opium Wars, there's loads of wars, there's wars everywhere happening here all the time. There's a 100-year war. How could we build all the buildings at the same time? We wouldn't have had the money. Anyway, Mickey's sort of a good idea. I could almost put these messages together and make a hangout, and I can make a video out of them. Just these messages.
I don't see why not. I think we've made some pretty good points there, haven't we? And, you know, this is the thing, really. But it's not that we're trying to be clever or pedantic about stuff. It's just that some things are so obvious that we lose sight of them. It's like the old wood for the trees kind of scenario, right? In plain sight, all those sorts of phrases. But in actual fact, this has got nothing to do with a conspiracy theory or anything of the sort. It's literally just observing something quite clear for us to see, looking at it and looking at what we're told that thing that we're looking at is all about. And if it doesn't add up, then you ask a question or two about it. And if those don't align, then you continue to ask. So, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Well, shall I put them all together in a video? There's loads of them now. Yeah, because obviously you say that you're going to make a video yourself as well, and you know this could just be the prelude to that, if you want, Sven. Obviously, some of the stuff that Mickey says is very interesting as well. I'd like to see that when we're supposed to be going at some point to the museum up in London whenever we get round to do that. And I want him to show me the other bits if he can. I'll probably never come home. Mickey will say, "Come on, I've got to show you so much." Yeah. Anyway. Very interesting stuff as always. I just wish I had all the answers.
I think we all make some very good points. So I think maybe it would be good to sort of play them in, like, I don't know, maybe put them in sections. So whichever sections are relevant to each other when we've sent the messages back and forth, maybe, I don't know, play the to and fro together that fits together, and then perhaps back that up with some imagery or whatever. Or maybe some sort of audio from you to kind of recap on that little, or just let it go, whatever. Just put it in sections, maybe. I wouldn't know how to do that, but certainly, yeah, I think it would be interesting for people to have a little listen in and just back it up with maybe some imagery. Perhaps. Don't know. Not sure. But good idea, though.
Hey, Sven, that is, you know when you go to London from Brighton on the train, and there's this great big bridge with all the pillars on. That's what that is. So how do they build all that then? Amazing.
What's it called?
An impossible in structure, he says.
Yeah, we have to look at the logistics again, right? So look at where it's built. Imagine all those roads and all that electricity and everything we have up and running as our infrastructure and everything today wasn't around when that was being built. They had to clear the land for it. They had to find the material for it. They had to have the technology to even extract the material. You had to have the manpower. You had to have the population for that. You had to have the know-how. Jesus Christ, you'd need the plans. You need accommodation, food, like we said earlier. There is so much. I mean, this would be like a project that would take decades, and it would be the only project you would be working on nationwide. You wouldn't be able to do any other project because this would take up all your energy and your resources. Just this alone. You know, putting in perspective, that's why we don't build these structures nowadays anymore. Not with these materials. We just don't. We piece them all together like Meccano, made of slabs of concrete. That's it. Basic. Yeah. And we're supposed to believe that the workers would have used what sort of scaffolding in a predominantly wet environment like the UK? Wooden scaffolding with ropes and stuff like that. We're supposed to have used that sort of technology in a country where we know it's moist by nature, as it were, right? Again, I don't even know where to start with the questions. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy structure. Crazy structure. Yeah. And we got loads of them dotted around all around the world. You know, we're talking thousands of these all around the world. That's the thing. Not just these as well, you know, all sorts of what we're told they were used for, but of course they weren't. But, you know, yeah. We have to also remember that we're talking a lot of weight with these structures as well. So they will also, which I mentioned in yesterday's video, they will go down quite deep into the ground. You have to. You have to, anyone who's worked on building or well, has a bit of logic about them, will understand that you'll need a solid foundation to carry a phenomenal weight above it, to stop it from going anywhere. Because also what you'll notice with these aqueducts, viaducts and whatnot, they're always out in the open somewhere, aren't they? But they're going to be exposed to a lot of rough old weather. That alone would have been one heck of a hurdle to overcome to just construct these things. And like I say, they're built everywhere. Hot places, cold places, wet places, dry places. Yeah, and again, we're led to believe that these constructions were built for the purposes of getting a train across it. Now, you know, for me personally, that doesn't equate either. I can't say I'm a particularly great businessman by trade, but I can do some basic mathematics, and that doesn't work out if you're putting in that effort and using that amount of resources just to get a train track or two on there. They wouldn't have thought back then that you're going to have thousands of trains going across that thing every year, which I don't even know if you do, but certainly back then in the day you wouldn't have. So you would have been building those constructions for a poxy bloody steam train. One. They may have had two. They wouldn't have had fleets of them. You know, it's just... So this stuff must have been around before they started building the trains. They wouldn't have just knocked these up after the train came along. But that's what we're led to believe, isn't it? Although, of course, they will kind of tell a semi-truth that these viaducts and aqueducts were originally Roman builds, weren't they? The Romans built them, and then now we can walk across them, or our barges go across the aqueducts, don't they, like in the Welsh mountains and stuff like that. There was a documentary about one of them there as well, you know, who the bloody hell built that. You know, so yeah, you still have a half-baked excuse as to who built them. So the Romans were supposed to have built them. You know, these fellows who wore sandals and bronze skirts, who're supposed to traipse thousands of miles across Europe, conquering everything in their wake. What did they live off? Baked beans in a tin? Where did they sleep? How did they get here? What, did you all have 20 horses each? I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. Again, the backstory, flawed to hell.
And just adding, by the way, maybe they were carrying water. So it's like a canal up on the bridge. You see a lot of those with them carrying water, don't you?
Viaduct.
So it's a water viaduct, really, and they've turned it into a train viaduct. But even that is still masses of industrial stuff going on, and well before their saying, and
In the water.
you know, they've got us in horses and carts until the sort of middle 1800s, and then it vamps up a bit for the end of the 1800s. But it's not true. And the Romans, they just seem to have everything. The Romans have all the roads, the viaducts, the water, everything, toilets, the whole lot. That's what I see, don't you, Mickey?
Mm-hmm.
So how did they get all that? They had it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
And from Google Maps, there was a river underneath it, a massive river.
1 second. 1 second. So Mickey's saying that they were under this viaduct, the first one we sent you, not the Brighton one, the other one, on the way to Brighton. There was a river underneath.
Yeah, and it's all dried up now. It's only about a couple of ponds. You can see it on Google Maps.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the trains, but we're going to use the water viaducts. Because now we've got all these bell towers or whatever it is, or towers to put the water in.
Yeah, it's weird.
We turn them into train stations and train tracks and things. I don't know. Yeah. It's almost like we're in fantasy land here, and all these. I just can't. Anyway, it's been and it's gone. That's the weirdest bit and stuff as well, isn't it? It's been and gone, and it's so magnificent. Some of it.
Well, we do have those theories, don't we, of arch-shaped buildings, which of course aqueducts and viaducts are. There are lots of arches next to each other, aren't there? If you take a step back and look at them, yes, we see them as something that would carry something across it, like water in the form of an aqueduct, or trains or footpaths or whatever. But what if they are, as has been suggested, in terms of what is the Arc de Triomphe, for example, or what is Marble Arch, and all these arches that you find all around the world, what if they have something to do with electromagnetism? What if they are like your magnetic horseshoes, if you like, north and south, and it has something to do with an electronic sort of circuit board of some sort, and they actually had a totally different function, but we of course see them as a bridge type building, but in actual fact that's maybe what they were never ever constructed for in the first place. Again, that's how our history books have put that indoctrination into our heads, and we have to unlearn that. Yeah, built with probably millions of bricks altogether, right? And yet brick manufacturing didn't happen on an industrial scale, which is what's required for those sorts of constructions, until 1885. And I keep reiterating 1885 because even in all the official brick making, bricklaying, whatever journals and stuff, that's the dates that's given. So although they keep quoting, oh, bricks have been in use since 7000 BC, well, that's all the red herring stuff. The important stuff is, when did we start using bricks in our civilization to enable us to build things like water towers, or like those viaducts and aqueducts and things like that? When did we start using them? And of course those dates are set in stone, excuse the pun. 1885. Up until that point, brick masons manufactured their own bricks on site, which is ludicrous when people understand the actual process of making a brick. And I put a video up on the, I think, the Where It's At channel. It's good to watch. You can see a guy making a brick from start to finish, or bricks. Yeah, madness.
I knew you would like that, because I knew you'd say that we weren't manufacturing bricks at that time. And what did you say, Mickey?
About
how they could build them both at the same time.
Yeah, it's just yeah. I just had to laugh at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you sent another message, so we'll listen to that one. Hang on.
Same year.
Same year, yeah. Yeah, a bit of a joke, isn't it?
Clever.
Yeah. Yeah.
History.
Anyway, well, this is your message now. Personally, I can't see the problem with just telling us the truth about when the things were really built and putting everything in perspective of what it is. They've obviously done something so bad that they've covered it up, because why would you go for all this to totally lie? I mean, that probably should say 16 or 1700, but then you think, well, how did they do it all then? I suppose in the 1800s they use a revolution, don't they? And that's how they did it, but it's just rubbish. And yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And now I knew you'd say that, Sven, about the bricks. I knew you'd say that.
Yeah, the buildings are much, much older than what we're told. Absolutely. Even the cladding doesn't line up with the making of the bricks needed for that cladding. So the cladding is older than we're told. The buildings they're concealing is older than we're told. like I say, the mud flood event, the cataclysmic event, whether it came from above, whether it came from below, whatever it was, but we know the ground levels have changed, no doubt about that, right? So when did that happen? And then, of course, you've got all the other anomalies. Things like, who the bloody hell built a cathedral for a population of 300 people living in a local village? You just wouldn't do that. Look at Salisbury. There's a great example of a medieval town, so-called, with a huge cathedral that's about to celebrate 800 years this year. And yet look at the little buildings dotted around it, and they're all skew-whiff, and people had to chuck their toilets out the window back in the day. That's how primitive they were. And we're expected to believe that they managed to build that stuff. It's nonsense. I know I mentioned that before, but it's just nonsense. It really is. And, you know, there's a seriousness to this topic. So it's one thing to be able to, you know, as you guys know anyway, but I would say this to my daughter or something when she gets around to asking me those sorts of questions eventually. You know, it's one thing to be aware and to acknowledge that you've been lied to. And then to also think, okay, what do I do with my newfound information or my queries? But then, you know, then it's another thing to then draw conclusions from it and try and find an answer to these questions, because that is then the next step. And that's where we have to be a bit careful and not expect to find something when we're digging around, metaphorically speaking, of course. But yeah, fascinating nevertheless. Lots and lots and lots of questions, and it's a topic that I'm sure will get attacked pretty badly soon online.
That's why I sometimes watch some of the abandoned channels, because they take you to all these amazing places and show you all these amazing places, and you sometimes get to see what's inside and bits that are left and machinery that's left, let alone all the bad things about people's files and biohazard and all that crap stuff left. But that's why I sometimes look at the abandoned channels, because they're like you, they're the reporters showing us what's going on. There's just no way it was built in when they said it was built. So, but we are slowly getting there, and people are making videos and showing more and more slowly. But yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, amazing subjects though, isn't it? And the deeper you go, the more deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but there's just no answers. Anyway,
Yeah, it's the tangibility of it that for me is so good in this kind of research. You know, it's there for us to see, isn't it? We can have hands-on experiences of it. We can see for ourselves. We can even compare it to other buildings, often in the same street. We even have the luxury, excuse me, coughing. We even have the luxury of walking past building sites sometimes, so sometimes you get a glimpse of how they actually construct buildings today. You know, the use of breeze blocks, a lot of basic cladding, sort of roof extensions just made of wood and framing and all that sort of stuff. Really basic, simplistic styles that are no comparison to the buildings that quite clearly have stood the test of time. You know, the magnificent buildings, the big ones, you know, the ones in Moscow, the ones in Budapest, all these huge ones, and then never mind all the red brick ones. I mean, it's just so much of it, isn't there? So much of it that's unanswered. But yeah.
Yeah, nearly all those buildings you're mentioning will be, a few floors of them will be under the ground. They're never going to be flush to the surface. They'll always have a few floors under the ground. What were you going to say, Mickey?
Nothing.
I know, it's just mind-boggling to... It's just, what were we in? Atlantis? What's the other one? Avalon? I don't know, whatever it was goddamn amazing.
Oh yeah, just a quick one, Karen, before I forget as well. I was going to ask you regarding tomorrow. You're putting the premiere out at 6, aren't you? Are you going to be in the live chat then for that? I just wanted to double check with you, because I'm presuming I'll be going in the live chat anyway, but I can only use my phone, unfortunately, for that. My iPad won't support that. I've got an ancient iPad, about over 10 years old, so I can't even use my app on my YouTube or anything like that. I have to go through Safari, so it's just all a bit long-winded. But yeah, I just wanted to know. I'm more curious than anything else, really. Okie dokie, that was it. I hope you've been enjoying the Saturday hitherto.
Hi Sven, yes, I will be in the chat room tomorrow.
Chinese takeaway.
I'll be in the chat room tomorrow. I'm usually in my chat rooms. It's very rare I'm not. It's just not I've accidentally forgot one. But yeah, I'll be in the chat room tomorrow. Thanks a lot for all the chat. I think I'm going to make our chat into a video because we say so much. Yeah.
Put a video out and make it up out of our sort of dialogue that we've had, because I think there's some really valid points in there. I really do. You know, it's all about perspectives, isn't it? It's all about getting used to seeing things from different angles, just like statistics. I've done it in other videos in the past. For example, you know, I used to use the stats they used to blurt out on the TV, like NHS stats and all that sort of nonsense. And then I'd play around with the stats and present them differently, and suddenly people are going, oh, never really thought of looking at it like that, and that makes even more sense. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's getting people to give that different way of looking at things a try. Getting them used to thinking not even outside the box, but thinking within, you know, much wider parameters that they've been told they have or they're allowed to use, you know. Anyway, speak soon.